Hey guys, it's Smokify here for League Top 10, and today I'm going to be giving you our first impressions of Trundle. Trundle came out about 2 weeks ago. He's a 4800 IP champion, and he's looking to be pretty good. I've had a lot of chance to play him, over 15-20 games or so, and I just wanted to give you my first impressions of him, what I thought of him. Is he good, is he bad, etc. Now, Trundle is a tanky melee DPS, and if you want to know a good comparison to another champion that's already out, he could be compared to Olaf late game, Warwick in some respects late game, and Xin Zhao, I guess, in some respects late game as well. Very tanky, can survive a lot, and they can do decent damage late game. Now, his role as a tanky DPS is to either initiate or be one of the first to go in on the fight because of his abilities that allows him to go in there and not take long and CC. He doesn't get hit by stuns as long or slows as long, which allows him to move about the battlefield and really do maximum amount of damage. In fact, his ultimate, which steals life and gives MR from a target, really allows him to initiate that much better because he doesn't have to worry about being initiated on so much, because combined with his W, which reduces CC and allows him to move quicker, he's able to actually take that brunt force and not have to worry about being focus fired too much. Now, that's only in some respects. I mean, obviously you still want to have to build somewhat tanky for him to really synergize really well with those two abilities, but that is his typical role. Now, as far as his early game goes, what he actually does when he first starts out, there's two real ways to play Trundle. You can play Trundle in a lane, or you can jungle with Trundle. Now, I've done both, and I can't even speak. They have their pros and cons. Now, jungling with Trundle, when you jungle with Trundle, you basically start at either Wolf Camp or you start at Golem Camp. I like to start at Wolf Camp if I'm doing a rank game with Trundle, because you get the big wolf just like in the spotlight, and then you move on to Golem. It's safe because if the clairvoyance there or check, you're not there, and so I typically do that and then move on to the big Golem, and you really don't lose that much HP switching between the two. Now, if it's just a normal game and I know I'm not a big risk of being ganked, I start at the big Golem and I just work my way around. Now, if you're good and go with cloth armor and 5 HP pots, then you will clear your entire creep wave or your entire creep camps in the jungle and hit level 4-ish about the time you get to golems. Now, typically with certain runes, like I'm running armor penetration, dodge, and then also cooldown reduction on the blues, and then flat HP quints. With all of that combined, I have to go back at level 4 to pick up a couple items and just to regen. Trundle isn't the best in the jungle, but he's not the worst. You can, once level 4, just continue on like normal. You don't have to back at that point. And if you're lucky and if you got a gank or something like that, you can actually pick up your Madrids and then just never ever have to go back at all. One thing good about Trundle is once you get your Madrids, at whatever level you get Madrids, I've done it as early as 4, you can go and do Dragon. So that is one big bonus. I've done Dragon at level 4 with just 1 HP pot and double buff, blue and red, and you just absolutely destroy him because his Q, which takes a flat amount of damage from the target and gives it to you, really synergizes really well with Dragon, because you'll take his damage and do it back to him along with the Madrids because it stacks with it, and you just have a great combo right there and you just do so much damage. Now, on the flip side of that, we have the laning Trundle, and laning Trundle is good too. I hear that some people prefer laning with him. I really can't say myself. I really like jungling, so I may just be biased there. But with laning Trundle, what's good about him is that every time a creep dies around him, he regains a percentage of his health. So, there's always constant creep waves, which really makes you an unstoppable laning force, because as long as you're around those creep waves when they die, you're always going to be regaining HP, so you can be poked a little more than normal. And it makes him great. The only thing that I see myself running into is mana issues if I'm in a gank or if I'm trying to initiate at them or poke at them. That's simply because that, jungle Trundle always have Golem, while laning Trundle does not. So I may swap out those dodge runes for some mana regen runes, and that may help me a lot. So those are the two ways that you can actually go, laning or jungle. And depending on which one you go, you might change up your item build a little bit. And that's what I wanted to talk about next. I wanted to talk about what items Trundle excels with. Well, number one, he excels with Madrids. I think Madrids on either of his builds work great. It allows you to farm quicker, especially with your W. You just smash through those creep waves like nothing. And you can build the Madrids into either the Wriggles Lantern, or you can build it into the Blood Razors. Now, for me, typically, if I'm jungling, I always go Wriggles. It's great for the ward, it's great for the regen, and it just allows you to kill those creep waves so quickly. Because until later in the game, Trundle's attack speed is only good when you have your W down. So when you're still jungling, and if you go the Wriggle route, you're still jungling, that W really helps you keep up with the pace and kill the minion waves without having to worry about only taking percentage amount of their HP rather than just taking a flat 500 off. So I like Wriggles a lot. Now if you're in the lane, I have gone Blood Razor, and that's worked really well, but again, it's kind of just situational. Whichever one you need more. If there's more tanky champions, I definitely would recommend going more Blood Razor than Wriggles, or you just may get both. Past that item though, it's kind of necessary right now to get some type of slow. So I've been always going on a Frozen Mallet, and the reason why I've been going Frozen Mallet is because Trundle has a great slow. His E, which is the Pillar of Filth, slows the targets around it, and if you're great placing that, you slow the target well. Coupled with your W, you can keep up to those targets. However, the minute they get out of that E, it becomes a lot harder to actually track down and kill your target. Just because once they get out of the E, there's no slow debuff, and they can outrun with Ghost your W. Now with a Frozen Mallet, it actually becomes easier, obviously, to actually keep on them. So once they get past the Pillar of Filth, then you're still stuck on them, and you're going to stay stuck on them with your Q, since your Q lunges you forwards. So I definitely say right now Frozen Mallet is a key item to build. Now, past that point, it really kind of just depends on what's happening. Because of Trundle's Q, you always gain a set amount of attack damage in a fight. So with that in play, you can be a little bit more lenient on what damage items you get, simply because you're going to be gaining a set like 35 amount of attack damage and not have to worry about that. So I typically go after Frozen Mallet. If they're really tanky or if they do a lot of damage, I go like a Banshee's Veil, or I go something like a GA, and that just allows you to stay in the fight that much longer. If I'm more lenient, I know that I have a lot more room to work with. I'll go more attack damage. So I may go, the Blood Razor like I was saying, or I may go something like Hex Drinker if I want somewhere in between. It just depends on the fight. I typically say get one more attack speed item after that, just so that you can keep his attack speed up. Because W is great for early game, but as later game goes, it's still great. But that one extra attack speed item really sets it apart. So I definitely say after that point, just kind of depends. Defensive if they're really tanking, they do a lot of damage, or offensive if you have a lot more room to work with and they're squishier. Now, as far as his item builds go, or not item builds, as far as his pros and cons go, I definitely have to say he's got several. Pros being that he's versatile, he can do lane or he can do jungle. He's great at initiating. He's got really tanky skills that allow him to regen HP and to also, steal magic resistance and armor from a target as well as life, making him, unstoppable force in a big team fight. So I definitely say that, and coupled with the CC reduction, makes him great. The Pillar of Filth, I cannot stress how awesome that ability is. There's only two of those types of abilities in game, his and Anivia's, that actually physically block off a route. I was actually in a game earlier with an Anivia, and we could literally block off like a huge area where they couldn't even get past once they got past Anivia's wall. It was amazing, and I loved it. Pillar of Filth is one of the shining abilities that he has, and you can really tell how good a Trundle is by how he uses that Pillar of Filth. Con-wise, I definitely have to say one of his cons is that early game he just doesn't do a ton of damage. You can really mitigate that a little bit with Ignite, although I don't like going Ignite with him. But Trundle early game just doesn't have a lot of abilities that do a lot of damage. He has his Q, but his R doesn't do a ton of damage. and he really kind of relies on sticking to the target, which can be very difficult early game if you don't have red buff, or you don't have frozen mallet, which typically early game you're not going to have the frozen mallet by that point. So I definitely say keeping and sticking on his target and making sure the target is dead would be kind of a problem he has early game. But that's typical of most carries. Most carry stuff, a little bit underpowered, and just kind of work up from there. Now, some tips that I can give you as far as what can make you a better Trundle player and kind of overcome some of those cons would be as follows. If you want a early slow, but you're not going to be jungling and you're not going to have access to the red buff, I would definitely say go Exhaust and Ghost, because the Exhaust will act as an additional slow, and so past the point where they're past the Pillar of Filth, then you exhaust them and you can still keep that slow and keep up with them. Also, I'd recommend that whenever you're initiating team fights, make sure that there's creeps around, again, because you get the HP regen from that passively, and so you'll be able to stay in a fight that much longer. I also recommend choosing when to decide to use your Pillar of Filth. Pillar of Filth, I can go on and on about what's the proper way to use that. But essentially, a great way to use Pillar of Filth is either to split their line right down the middle, so place it right between a cluster of them, so that way one of them is separated from the other. Typically, you want to separate the melee from the ranged, and just make them have to go around the pillar. People tend to just try to hug the pillar and go around, but the thing is, when you hug the pillar, you're constantly in the slow. It's better for them to actually get out by actually exiting the pillar's radius and then going around, and then actually initiating you, rather than just hugging the pillar and trying to get that shortcut. So splitting them with that is great. I cannot stress how good Trundle is as an initiator and as someone who can get away from a gank or a potential bad situation. Combined with W and Pillar of Filth, he really just has the ability to completely mitigate any kind of gank. You can basically throw down your W. If they pop Ghost, you'll pop your Pillar of Filth, and they have to go around that. I mean, there's so many times when I've almost been ganked or almost been killed, and as long as I had Pillar of Filth or W up, I could get away, because W increases your speed, movement speed, and you can just slap that on the ground in front of you and just run past them. Trundle is great with that, and using those two abilities in conjunction with each other is what will make you a good Trundle player. Really, it just depends. You just really need to slap your ultimate on a high HP, high armor, and high magic person. I'd say, like the tank. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to straight beeline for the squishiest person out there, because Trundle excels at taking out squishies because he can just stick to them once he has like a frozen mallet. Once you lay down your W and you separate them with your E, with your Pillar of Filth, you can just stick to them and just munch on them all day. I don't typically use my R on my kill target. I use my R on someone who's tanky and who I can steal the percentage of armor and magic pin from, and then I just go straight for my target, because R doesn't do a ton of damage. I mean, it does okay damage, but it's not the main focus of killing a target by putting R on it. Your main focus is to actually take high HP or high armor and magic resist and use that to your advantage in a team fight, which is great. Now, so with that out of the way, is Trundle worth it? Do I feel that as a 4800 IP champion, is he worth it? I definitely say yes. He is very unique in the fact that he has that Pillar of Filth. There's only 2 champions like that. It makes him a great play. It's really fun to put that down and separate people. It's really fun to squeeze people against walls with it. And coupled with his Q and his W, which synergizes so well, it makes him a really fun guy to play. Is he overpowered? Is he underpowered? I would have to say right now, he borderline slightly underpowered, simply because the only thing I wish for him to see, or wish for him to have rather, is a kind of residual slow off of his Pillar of Filth. I wish that once they exited the Pillar of Filth, they had a kind of small slow on them, not like the Pillar of Filth slow, but just something that's residual, that lasts for 2 seconds, 1.5 seconds. That way you can still remain on them for just a short amount of time after they exit the pillar, because I feel like that's his one fault, is he actually requires Frozen Mallet in order to do good. He requires it so that he can stay on those targets. Otherwise, he's just not going to be able to keep up with, W isn't going to last long enough, or Pillar isn't going to keep them there enough, because he doesn't have really high damage output until late game in your farm somewhat. So if they could change the Pillar a little bit so there's a residual slow, you could stay on your target a little better, then that would be great. Well, overall, that is my opinions on Trundle. I really enjoy him. I really enjoy playing him. He is really fun for me to play. The Pillar of Filth is awesome. I feel he's pretty balanced, and he actually can be played several different ways as far as item build wise. And I hope to see you guys out in the battlefield playing some Trundle. This is Spunkify for League Top 10. I'll see you later.
Victory!